So one of the things that's just totally unacceptable is that, we know about the disaster that is the Doge cuts, but we just know about it in terms of raw data and numbers. We don't really know specific stories of people who have been impacted by it. I remember covering one in the early days where they cut off the U.S. aid money, and some woman was kicked out of a hospital because the hospital was funded by U.S. aid money, and she died. I remember that. We talked about that. But how many examples like that have there been, right? It is mind-boggling. We already know, based on the numbers, there's about 300,000 deaths because of all the U.S. aid funding that's been cut off. Over time, it's literally going to be millions of people. Why? Because we sent these, really cheap medicines that fix these problems that people have, and as long as they keep getting that medicine, they're fine. Well, when you withhold that medicine, what happens? Well, when you're talking about HIV, you're talking about AIDS, you're talking about malaria, death happens. That's what happens, right? So here's MSNBC host Lawrence O'Donnell. He talks about this, and he basically chokes up as he's explaining a story of a specific person who lost their life because of the U.S. aid cuts. Here we go.
This was a child as precious as yours or mine. Evan's life was in our hands, and for 5 years, America kept him alive with antiretroviral medicines costing less than 12 cents a day through the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, or PEPFAR. This was a program started by President George W. Bush and has saved more than 26 million lives so far, and it turned the tide of AIDS around the world and built enormous goodwill toward the United States. Then along came President Trump and his freeze on most humanitarian aid in January. How could a 5-year-old orphan possibly obtain medicine on his own? Evan weakened and soon died of an opportunistic infection. Marco Rubio told the House committee, no children are dying on my watch. Evan died on his watch. Evans of all ages are dying on Marco Rubio's watch, and no one is counting. And so we don't know, as of tonight, whether it's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Evans, but we know it will be. In a New York Times column titled, quote, Elon Musk's legacy is disease, starvation, and death, Michelle Goldberg reports. Brooke Nichols, an associate professor of global health at Boston University, has estimated that these cuts have already resulted in about 300,000 deaths, most of them of children, and will most likely lead to significantly more by the end of the year. This is what Musk's foray into politics accomplished. If there were justice in the world, Musk would never be able to repair his reputation, at least not without devoting the bulk of his fortune to easing the misery he's engendered. Musk's sojourn in government has revealed severe flaws in his character, a blithe, dehumanizing cruelty, and a deadly incuriosity. Bill Gates has seen starving children in Africa many, many times and has devoted his life and his billions to trying to save them, which makes Bill Gates' verdict on the current richest person in the world so important and powerful. Bill Gates, the former richest person in the world, said, "The picture of the world's richest man killing the world's poorest children is not a pretty one. And the picture of the richest person in the world carrying around his drug box of ecstasy, Adderall, psychedelic mushrooms, and then taking life-saving drugs away from the poorest people in the world is a picture only Donald Trump could have created." And with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, soulless, mindless entities are what you see. We'll be right back.
Elon's got to be locked up. It's that simple. When you look at the impact of these cuts, first of all, every single cut, every single one is illegal. Violates the Impoundment Control Act. It violates the power of the purse. Effectively, the richest man in the world has usurped the power of both Congress and the president, doing what he wants. Even if Trump, in theory, were to grant him, I want you to do that, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Once Congress passes something and the president signs it, it becomes law. That's it. It's over. It's done. Instead, the world's wealthiest robber baron goes in there and says, I want to cut this thing. I want to cut that thing. I want to make sure we don't send that out. I want to make sure this money doesn't go out. Well, what's the end result? You know what the end result is. They slashed pediatric cancer research. They slashed Meals on Wheels. They cut the CFPB, the anti-scam police. They cut nuclear safety officials. They destroyed FEMA. They destroyed the Department of Education. They fired 83,000 veterans. They shut 50% of the Social Security offices. They fired 250,000 public workers. They fired food safety inspectors, air traffic controllers, this USAID money. Objectively, one of the only decent things this government does. Domestically, you could point to Social Security, you could point to Medicare, Medicaid. There are good things that happen domestically for sure. But overseas, one of the few good things that this country does, the world's sole superpower, or at least we were until recently, is U.S. aid stuff. That's what's called soft power. In other words, you don't get people to like you and support you by going in there and pointing a gun in their face and taking things over hostilely. You get countries to support you, and you build goodwill towards your countries by going in there and doing sincere charity. And it didn't cost that much relative to what other things in the government cost. And now, no more malaria medication, no AIDS medication, no HIV medication. These basic things that these people in these countries relied on, very poor countries, you ripped it away. And of course, deaths skyrocketed. Of course that happened. But they don't care. They don't care. Elon doesn't care about anybody but himself. His greed. He takes $8 million a day in government subsidies, but he was ripping malaria medication and HIV medication from the hands of little kids who needed it to survive overseas. $38 billion in subsidies overall is what he's taken. He's the biggest welfare queen in the country. But there he is, doing his standard rant about how big government is bad. Apparently it's not bad when it's money to you. That's what you think. When the reality is, it's actually not bad when it's money going towards people who desperately need medicine in order to survive. I mean, what a scumbag. What a charlatan. What a con man. It really is. It's beyond disturbing. I hope they keep up, the media keeps up with stories like this, with pressure like this. Because again, I know I've said it 1,000 times, I'll say it 1,000 more. We cannot let them get away with it. It's got to be a litmus test on the Democratic side in 2028. You need to be in favor of prosecuting all of these criminals, these billionaire criminals, who have destroyed this country thoroughly. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.